Thank you for coming today. This is a particular pleasure for me. This program over here, this center, this department, has become sort of my second department. Before I start my own talk, I want to congratulate the center for getting their Title VI grant renewed. So if we could all just... I have a lot of people to thank over here who've really been instrumental in my interest in both the Middle East and in South Asia over the years. I noticed that Mahmoud Azaz is here, who put up with trying to teach an old woman Arabic for 2 years, which they don't speak in Pakistan, by the way. I want to talk today a little bit about my journey over the past couple of years, why I ended up there, why it took so long to end up there. I was going back over my journal notes a couple of days ago, and I noticed that my first journal entry for my first day in Pakistan read as follows: "Please fasten your seatbelts. We will be landing shortly. Please remember to turn off all mobile materials. Entering Pakistan with drugs will result in the death penalty. Have a nice night, and welcome to Islamabad." That was my first entry. I had others. I decided about 5 years ago, maybe more, that I wanted to go to Pakistan. I wanted to teach there, and I wanted to write there. I was very interested in living in an Islamic society and in trying to understand, from a very personal point of view and from my students' point of view, the conflict that has gone on both within the country and between the country and our country since 9/11. My journey started quite a while ago. It took me 3 years to get a visa. The problem was not so much 9/11 as one might think, but a gentleman whose name was Raymond Davis, who got in the way of my visa. You may or may not remember him, but he was a CIA contractor who in 2011 had the misfortune, and so did the people he shot, of gunning down several Pakistanis in Lahore from an SUV. And a bunch of Glock pistols were found in his car. The U.S. Embassy in Islamabad claimed that he had diplomatic immunity and that he was simply working for them. This was actually not true. That incident, as I sat here waiting for my visa, I would say probably really did more to set things back than any other single incident that had taken place since 9/11. In fact, to this day, it's very interesting. When I talked to Pakistanis, it was never what they call OBL, Osama bin Laden, who was brought up, but it was Davis, the Davis affair. The Raymond Davis affair is really the sticking point, because it really deprived, took away any sort of lingering sense of trust. And that's what the American community and the embassy over there has been in the process of trying to rebuild. I was one of 2 Fulbright scholars over there. The other was Pakistani American. He was able to move about the culture a little bit more freely than I was. I don't blend. And so I was worried. I knew about the security before I went there, and the security was actually, it was fairly hideous. And I wondered, I knew I'd be able to teach. I knew I'd be able to get right over here. Whoopsie, I can't even work this today. Okay, to Rawalpindi, which is just south of Islamabad. That's where I was teaching. But could I move around the culture? And before I left, a man who's a very wonderful writer, who got his MFA from this university, Daniel Muenuddin, who wrote a wonderful book called In Other Rooms, Other Wonders, gave me a very, very solid piece of advice that I carried across several continents with me. He said, if they put you behind a door, and if they close the door, write about the door. It made a lot of sense. And so began, I just put this picture in because I love it, and I met them. So began my journey at Fatima Jinnah Women's University. Here it is. It's rather lovely, actually. And it's in the city of Rawalpindi, which is sort of an extension. Those of you who've been over there might know this. It's kind of an extension of Islamabad, though it's a much older city. It was founded in 1998. It's a brand new university, but the buildings are very old. President Zia, President Bhutto, Ali Bhutto had their offices right here in this main building where the Vice Chancellor now resides. So far, 8,500 students have gotten degrees from the university. And it's called Fatima Jinnah because it's named after the sister of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was the first Governor General of Pakistan. And Fatima Jinnah, she worked tirelessly for women's rights. Here are some sort of random shots around the university. These are, boy, you learn to dress up over there. Some of my colleagues in the English department, which was also affiliated with Women's and Gender Studies over there. They had a very, very active Department of Women's and Gender Studies. Random shots I took around the campus. Yes, men are allowed on campus. Yes, there are a few men instructors, not very many. My students took one look at me after the first week and started clothing me. I would come to class and somebody would look at my feet, which are large, and then the next day there'd be a pair of shoes. Other times there would be a shalwar kameez. Another time a scarf. So on and on it went. You may notice here the first women bank, yeah. The women did their banking there, and it was a bank founded by women, and it was a bank for women. To give you more of an insight into what was going on, this is more of the campus there where I was working. This is Islamabad. It became the capital in 1960. Steve Inskeep calls Karachi an instant city. I call Islamabad an instant city. Everything here is brand new. It was built to be the administrative center of the new Pakistan. And if you notice, hold on, if you go down the road here, oh yes, yes, you may recognize this. This was the plastic, this was the plastic pool toy walla. But if you look here, hold on, I can't really find it right now. I'll find it in a bit. I had problems putting all of this together. But you can see, I mean, this is a very modern city, and you know, you go down the road, everybody's got cell phones. warning pedestrian crossing. Now that warning should be for the pedestrians, actually. This is Faisal Mosque in Islamabad, and I'll actually come back to that in a bit because it's part of an ongoing discussion that's going on there now about what a lot of Pakistanis in the cities call the increasing Saudiization of Pakistan and Islamabad, by which they mean an incredible amount of money is being funneled in from the Saudis, both for education, for the madrasas, for the mosques. I lived not far from, actually, strangely enough, a McDonald's. My neighborhood, my Marquez, where I could shop, I couldn't go much of any place on my own. I couldn't walk any farther than a city block from where I lived. I had to go everywhere with a driver. I couldn't go to massive public functions. What qualified as massive and what qualified as just a public function became very, very, there were gray areas, and I learned actually to negotiate them. I mean, after 6 months, I was able to do a little bit more than I did when I first got there. But let me go back to my life there as a teacher. I went there and got there a month late. Everybody was already in the midst of school. Beware, book privacy is a crime. Everybody had already started the semester, and there were huge classes that everybody else taught, but mine. I didn't have many students. I had 13 students, and I thought, I'm late. Everybody signed up for another class. And so I never questioned it. What I went there with was my armaments, books. I went there to teach 13 young women who were master's students, a course in Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. And I went there to teach the same group a course in contemporary American women writers. And I told them on the first day, I said, look, we've got to sign a compact here. You're my window. You're my window on this entire country because I can't go anyplace. I couldn't even see Rawalpindi outside the gates of where I taught. Why? Because it's a rough and tumble city, and there have been all kinds of incidents there. And so my students agreed, and we embarked on this class. Of the 13, I had 2 in burqas, 1 in chadar, 6 in hijab, a couple in looking like me today, and me. One of my students, and this is where the window started, one of my students was originally from Karachi, capital of Sindh province, but had gone to Quetta to teach. She taught at the university there. And she was there with her husband, and she was there with her children. And she received threatening letters from people in Quetta saying, you are taking the jobs away from the Quettans. You from Karachi are taking our jobs. That was one kind of letter she got. The other kind of letter was, you're a woman, you shouldn't be teaching here. So life in Quetta is very, very different than life in Karachi, which is very different yet than life in Islamabad. I say this to you, having not been in Karachi, having not been in Quetta, but remember I was using, my students were happy to be used. And so one day, Shumaila was out shopping, and her accent was different because she was from the South, and so people knew where she was from. So that was the day she said, I decided to don a burqa, a black burqa, and I never took it off. So for me, coming from America, this is very interesting because we have a particular idea of what it means to wear the burqa. Someone else in my class, Azka, probably my most brilliant student. I told her one day, I said, you know, you can go to Harvard. She said, you know, probably you wonder why I'm wearing this burqa. She says, you know, nobody in my family wanted me to wear this. They thought I'd never have a husband, I'd never have a kid, I'd never have a good job. Nothing would ever happen to me. She said, hey, I have a husband, I have 2 kids, I have a great job, and I'm in school. So they were wrong. She said, for me, wearing this burqa was not a gesture of submission. It was a gesture of rebellion. It was rebellion against my family because they didn't want me to do this. And so there were all kinds of reasons why my students were doing what they did. I would say our most fascinating, the conversation where we were pushing at each other. If you know anything about Tolstoy's great novel, Anna Karenina, it starts off with an adultery. An adultery of a man who's going to keep committing adultery for 800 pages in this novel, yeah? And my students said to me, they said, why doesn't somebody do something about this? And so I couldn't answer them. So I threw it back. I said, okay. I said, what would happen if a man does that here? So there was much discussion that ensued about this, okay? And the general consensus of opinion is that no, my husband, if he did this, would not lose his job, but he would have to go before the parents, his own parents and the parents of his wife, and he would have to talk, and he would have to be forgiven for this. So we talked a lot about this. Here in America, in Tucson, when I teach this huge novel, I'm always bringing up questions like, what is love? What's a good marriage? What makes a good parent? How to live a good life? These are the big questions that Tolstoy was asking. I said to my students, I said, Anna Karenina doesn't have a happy marriage. She falls in love. What are you going to do? And all of my students, all of them, 13 young women said, what do you mean? I said, well, she has a choice. I said, no, she doesn't. She doesn't have a choice. Her choice has been made. Her choice has been made. Her choice has been made by Quran and by Sharia law. And so we couldn't get into the kind of discussion that I have over here about all of those gray areas. What is your responsibility to family? What is your responsibility to yourself? So these were the hard things that we fought over a little bit. At the same time, in the news, and I was, for some reason, I was getting 5 papers a day delivered to the house where I lived. I lived in this cavernous house that could have fit actually most of the people in this room. I was the only one there except for the other Fulbright scholar, and the cook, and the driver, and the 5 security guards. And the 5 security guards, you'll be interested to know, were hired by Wackenhut, which is the organization in the United States that actually transports prisoners from one place to another. They're actually used by the Border Patrol here to transport the migrants who have been arrested. So here were some Pakistanis in Whack-and Hut uniforms, and it was a little bit of a shock to me. But as I read the 5 papers a day, there was some interesting stories going around that provided sort of fuel for what, grist for the mill for what we were talking about in class, and that is there was a whole spate of honor killings that were going on. There was a really rather horrible one that took place in Lahore. A young woman named Farzana. Everyone was talking about this. This was on GOTV before it was taken off the air. That was another story. And a young woman named Farzana had disobeyed her parents, and she had married someone else, and she had gone to the main court in Lahore to justify before the magistrate this new marriage. Her family had come, the entire family, and with bricks they stoned her to death. This was reported all over the Pakistani news. There were several parts of this. I mean, what emerged from it was that the man she had married, the new husband actually, you know, these stories acquire lives of their own, you know. Her new husband had actually killed his former wife in order to marry her, and then there was an incident with the sister. Be that as it may, I said to my students, I said, look, I said, you have this in Pakistan. Some of my students said, no, we don't. It's really in the northwest frontier provinces. We don't have it in the big cities. I was Lahore. But the students said to me, they said, well, there was a discussion. They said, part of this comes from Quran. Somebody else said, no, this is not in Quran, that you can kill your wife. Other of my students said, well, is this something like what Anna is going through? You make a choice for yourself, and you get something horrible that happens to you as a result of societal response to it. So what was going on in the newspapers provided grist for our mill inside our classroom. You all have probably heard of Malala, the young woman who was from an area up near Waziristan, who was shot by the Taliban because she was trying to get an education. And now she is all over the news, and she's written a book. Her book is called I Am Malala, and she is a great advocate for women's education, not only in Pakistan, but all over the world. This actually became a source of much discussion in the Pakistan media and in my class. It was dribbling down to every level. At first people were saying, well, the book has been banned. Well, not in the stores I went into. There it was on the shelf. But the problem, I said, well, do you all support her? And my students said that there was silence, very, very telling silence. And what on GOTV, the discussion had revolved around the following, that, well, she couldn't have written the book. That was the first thing. Her father probably wrote it for her. Okay, point one. Point two, whenever she mentioned Prophet Muhammad, she did not say, blessed be his name. So on Pakistan TV, there was all of this discussion about this. So in other words, she has acquired much more renown and cachet over here than she has in her own country. Let me go to contemporary American women writers. Alice Walker, The Color Purple. Maxine Hong Kingston, The Woman Warrior. The poetry of Lucille Clifton. And on we went. Mostly my students had no idea that there was such division in American society. They saw it as all of us, much more as a kind of monolithic whole than we really are. What I think impressed them most of all, that we ended up talking about, The Color Purple, surely, but an essay that Alice Walker wrote, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, if anybody's ever read it. Alice Walker's mother was really sort of functionally illiterate, and she came from a very poor family, but she had a garden and she quilted. And it got these women to think about their own grandmothers and to think about the tradition that had been passed down in their families, a tradition that was primarily not a literate tradition, not literary. Still today, the figures for the number of women educated in Pakistan is really quite low. It reflects the disparity between the city and the countryside. So I think the other thing that really hit them was Maxine Hong Kingston's book, The Woman Warrior, because she has a story in it about a woman, a Chinese woman who's a warrior. And the lesson of that story that Kingston is trying to bring home is, how can you be a warrior and a dutiful daughter? How can you go out and change the world and then come home and be obedient? So that, for a lot of these women, that's really what I think impressed them more than anything. That was essentially what went on in our classes. At the same time, I was trying to keep a journal, and I was trying to write. And I clearly and quickly knew what I wanted to write about. I was living in a neighborhood that seemed to be a neighborhood of dead people. There was nobody living there. I felt like I was the only person in what you call F10. Islamabad is divided into sectors, sort of numerical sectors. I finally got permission from the embassy. Sometimes I think this went to Washington, it went over Obama's desk. I got permission to walk with my neighbor, who of course was Pakistani. And we would walk to Fatima Jinnah Park at night in Islamabad, and we would cover about 6 kilometers. Okay. And I said to him the first night, I said, Muhammad, I said, teach me Pakistan. He said, okay. And so this is just a little snippet of something that I came home one night and wrote. I have started taking evening walks with my neighbor, Muhammad, a gentleman recently retired from his work as a biochemist. He has lived with his wife in this neighborhood for 35 years, raised 3 children, and is my source of information on the lives encased here behind the iron gates and walls. The place is moribund, I tell him one evening. There is nothing going on here. It's a neighborhood of dead people. It's only what you think, he smiles. Many things go on here. And so we walk. Do you see that man, Mohammed asked me as we started out for our evening walk one night. He's been sitting on that chair outside that gate for 25 years. At first he was a young man. Now he is old. That is how it happens. I had indeed been watching him for 4 months since I first came here. He was the only sign of life on this leafy block. He sits on the white plastic chair outside one of the mega mansions, his head folded into his beard. I count the rooms and the windows of the house he guards from my vantage point across the street. 3 huge stories, rooms that extend a full city block, shades drawn, large outdoor spaces, balconies. He sits on a white plastic chair, guarding empty spaces. From time to time, he gets up from his chair, walks inside the gate to unfold his prayer rug and say his prayers. But for the rest, he sits, pausing from his idleness long enough only to exchange gossip with our security guards on the other side of the street, or a word with the used book and magazine walla or the garbage walla. From time to time, a car will appear. The gates will open and immediately shut as the car is absorbed into the spaces inside. Every few weeks, I see a gardener trimming the hedges or a driver hosing off the tires. Assalamu alaikum, I say to him as I come out in the quiet of early morning. He waves his hand and answers, wa alaikum salam. It stops there. It is partially language, partially perhaps something else. Mainly he sits below the linden leaves, watching our street settling into itself in the morning. Even Americans don't live like this, I tell Muhammad as we make our way to Jinnah Park in the evening. But he knows this, having lived and studied in the United States. Have you ever thought, Muhammad told me one evening as we left for our evening walk, that the only people living in these houses are the poor who can't afford a roof over their head or even a plot of land? If they weren't guarding these houses, they would be out on the street. I had not thought about it that way, but he was right. So where are the owners, I asked him. Different places. Some are out of country in Europe or in the UAE, I suppose. Some are military. They're stationed someplace else, and then they will come back and reclaim their houses. The military live like this? I asked incredulously, knowing that this is a far cry from the standard of living the military are accustomed to in the US. Some do, he answered. Yes, most definitely, some do. One night as I lay in bed, I heard a horn in the middle of the night and went to investigate. I saw a car slide through the neighbor's iron gates, which clanged shut immediately behind it. I saw two nondescript forms emerge from the car, and then the lights went out. The car sat in the driveway the next day. The following morning, it was gone. I have never seen the owner of this house. You won't, Muhammad explained to me as we made our way along the street and back alleys leading to Jinnah Park. He is from Swat Valley. He has never worked a day in his life. He is some big tribal chief up there. The two sons both tried to get into politics, but had a falling out. Now we have this son here on our block collecting the money that the father gathers from ruling the valley. I once saw him out walking, but he goes no farther than this one block, like I did. He doesn't dare. He's probably afraid he's going to get killed. From what I know, he may be correct in this. It has been several months now since a group of women and their children moved into the neighborhood, taking up residence in the servants' quarters in some of the larger houses down the street where I am allowed to walk. As we move along the alleyways framed by white walls ringed in barbed wire, I see the women wrapped in their multicolored dupattas, gathered in groups in the evening under the trees to talk, always with children in tow. There are no men with them. From time to time, I see their children being absorbed into the soccer games with the well-heeled kids from the neighborhood who are teaching the servants' kids the finer points of the game. For a moment, the invisible lines that divide lives are stripped away in squeals. Later, when Muhammad and I come back from our walk, some of the boys will have disappeared back inside the front entrances of the homes to do their homework. The others will have gone around to the back alley and into the back door that leads to the room they share with their mother. As for me, I say goodnight to Muhammad and am reabsorbed inside my own wall for the night. These were some of the things. This is the house I lived in. The man next door to our house had to move. He had 5 wives and 50 children, and they outgrew the house. So they moved down towards the airport, and they built a bigger house. This is my, I taught my driver the American word hood. I said, Ali, this is the hood. This is it. There are no people in this neighborhood. But there's a lot of life inside. I'm going to talk for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to open this up to questions. You cannot live there, and I couldn't, without dealing with the violence and what that means and how it trickles down. You know, you can easily fall prey to the illusion that you're uniquely important there as an American because of all the bloody security surrounding you. But the reality is that everybody who lives there is in danger. The kinds of violence that Islamabad in particular has been subjected to in the past couple of years, some of it was directed directly at Americans and at foreigners. The bombing, for example, of the Marriott Hotel in 2008. Other violence is sporadic, random, and tends to take place in places where foreigners are actually not likely to go. I have in mind here the open-air fruit markets in the not as well-heeled sections of the city. There have also been attacks in Rawalpindi, where I was working and teaching. Why? Because it is the center in Pakistan for the military high command. And so everybody there is a target. Most of my students were actually the daughters of very high-ranking army people, and they couldn't have me over because of security. Not just because of my security, but because of their security. So the targets are different. I can tell you this, that in the course of my time there, you know, because I couldn't travel to really any place, I readjusted my vision. I readjusted it downward. And so instead of sitting around and thinking, oh, I really want to go up to Gilgit, I really want to see K2, I really want to go to Lahore, you know, I said, okay, look, my life is going to be conversation. It's going to be sitting and drinking infinite cups of tea and talking about this country. And that's what I did. And I want to end this with a couple of insights that I garnered from my Pakistani friends, okay? One is, I was told time and time again, Adele, don't just talk about the Taliban. I said, here the Taliban is many different things. It's many different factions, many different sects. It takes many different forms. And I came to understand that. I also came to understand that W's war on terror has probably done more, that and Raymond Davis, has done probably more than anything else to turn the Pakistani government and Pakistani people away from us. I'm always telling my students, put yourself in a character's shoes, live there, walk around in those shoes. And the people I met in Pakistan said, live in our shoes, come on, walk down the street in our shoes and see how we feel if the country, your country, that wants to be friends with us is simultaneously supporting Israel and fighting the Palestinians and Hamas, and simultaneously launching drone strikes in North Waziristan against our militants. It is very hard for us. It's very hard when this is all going on. When I was getting ready to leave Pakistan, I got an email from a student of mine who, she was an odd student. She didn't talk much. but I could tell she was very transparent. You could always tell what she was thinking. And she wrote me an email. She had already left to go back to her native city. And she said, now that the semester is over, I will tell you what I think. She said, maybe you wondered why you had so few students. She said, no one wanted to study with you. He said, we had never studied with an American. We had never met an American. He said, you come into our country and you kill our people and you call us terrorists. And then you came and you walked into our room and you changed all that. And I'm not a big proponent, I'm not a proponent at all of American foreign policy, but I'll tell you that there is one thing that we're continuing to try and do right, and that is the Fulbright program. It's hanging by a thread over there. Pakistan sends more students than any other country in the world to the United States a year. We sent 2 Americans. And now there's no one over there because a man named Imran Khan, who is, would like to throw out the current prime minister of the country, Sharif. He and his followers have been staging a sit-in front of the Parliament building now for several months, and as has a cleric from Canada, Kadri. So because of all of this, things have again stopped, and Pakistan is not receiving any more Fulbrighters for the moment. So this is what's going on there. I don't claim, I'll tell you the caveat, I don't claim expertise in the country, I claim interest. And so I would say, let's see, it's 45 minutes. Why don't we I'll try and take a couple of questions, okay? All right, yeah.